Coffee with Jeff. Coffee with Jeff. Coffee.
Well, good morning. How you doing? My name is Jeff. I'm an old man from the Midwest, and I think I know what you might be thinking. You're saying, Jeff, where have you been for the last few weeks? Well, this picture might be a clue. That's right, I spent my Thanksgiving holiday in the hospital, and I'll have more about that at the end of today's show. Anyway, a few things I need to get out of the way right now. First of all, this film has nothing to do with the Beatniks or the Beat generation that became popular in the late 1950s. Nothing at all, but I'll take it a step further. There were no Beatniks ever. Beatniks didn't exist except in TV and films. The word beatnik was created to make fun of the Beat generation by a writer from the San Francisco Chronicle named Herbert Cohen. He combined the name of the Russian satellite Sputnik with the Beat generation and came up with it. And it's a term used now to make fun of the stereotype of, the goatee-wearing beret guy who spouts nonsensical poetry, why a free-spirited woman in black leotards dances along to bongo music and all that. I mean, the real Beats were people like William S. Burroughs, Allen Ginsberg, and Jack Kerouac. Remember Maynard G. Krebs as portrayed by Bob Denver in the TV show The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis?
Yeah, man, that Civil War was a swinging scuffle. Yeah? And one of those Dixie Cats blew it. They spent all their time smooching in the garden.
Where? Where's that?
Act 3.
Where? Where's that?
Here, dig this.
And remember that Beverly Hillbillies episode in which they met some Beatniks?
Howdy!
What'd she say, Shell?
Howdy. That's like, aloha. Oh, Ellen May, this is Wiggy and Shaky, and that's Horace, the great poet, thinker, and philosopher.
Well, howdy!
Aloha.
And here's a scene from Johnny Staccato starring John Cassavetes.
Running, falling, vomiting forth cobras enamored of fire escapes. If you give way, or hedge aside from the direct forthright, like to an entered tide, they all rush by and leave you hindmost.
That's how the media convinced the public of what the Beat generation were really about, and it was totally fabricated. Anyway, today we're going to talk about a film that was first shown on Mystery Science Theater 3000 on November 25th, 1992. It was a 1959 American teen-sploitation crime film, The Beatniks. By the way, the term teen-sploitation, I got that off of Wikipedia, but I doubt there are any actual teenagers in this film. Anyway, it was directed by Paul Frees and starred Tony Travis, Karen Kadler, Peter Breck, and many other wonderful people. Now, while I'm talking about a film that was first shown on Mystery Science Theater 3000, I'm more talking about the film itself and not so much about the MST3K episode. So, deal, but the episode's online, so you can check it out. It's actually a pretty funny episode. I would advise you to do that. Anyway, today I'm going to talk more about the production of the film and the actors and people involved. And next week, we'll all watch the film together and have a glorious time. Now, one reason I started out the show showing clips from TV shows from the 1960s is because, one, I love that silliness, and I wanted to make a point about Beatniks, but more importantly than that is I found out very little information about the making of this film, so I'm trying to lengthen the episode a little bit. So anyway, why don't we watch one more? This is from an episode of the show Peter Gunn.
Ragged little child, standing on the outside, with your nose pressed up against the window, crying 'cause you ain't never had a jelly donut. But don't you care, you'll grow up and drive a shiny red sports car.
No, it can't. Knows it
Join
can't.
a country club band if you're real good.
I don't know
Die
because
in a
I'm...
mud hole.
Defiant, explosive, a pulsating story of modern youth. Their password was mutiny against society. The Beatniks. Defiant? I guess, yes. Explosive? Well, not so much. A pulsating story of modern youth? Tony Travis was 33 when this film was made. Karen Kadler was 25 and Peter Breck 30. So can you consider them modern youth? I don't know. As far as Mutiny Against Society, well, we'll talk about that when we watch the film next week. So now I've searched and searched and couldn't really find out a lot about this film. The original working title for the film was Sideburns and Sympathy. It was announced as early as 1957 that the film was in production. Now what I found out was a little confusing. It starts with a man named Elmer Rodin Jr. Elmer lived from 1922 to 1959. He was the owner of like 400 movie theaters. Probably one of those guys who thought, hey, I'll just make my own movies to show in the theater. Anyway, he was the producer of such films as Corn's a Poppin' from 1955, The Delinquents from 1957, Daddy-O from 1958, and The Cool and the Crazy also from 1958. You can see he was a man who had his finger on the pulse of the younger generation. My reason for making teenage pictures is very simple. Money. The kids are the one keeping theaters open. Now it was announced that he would be producing this film, but he turned out not to be a producer, and I'm not sure what happened. I mean, it could be the fact that he died at the age of 37 in 1959, but the film was completely shot by April of 1958, so I'm not sure about that. For some reason, he just must have dropped out at some point. Now, the film cost like $100,000, and it was shot in 8 to 10 days, so I've read other places that it was shot in as little as 4 days, so I'm not sure about that. This was a Glenview production. Apparently, they were using non-union crews, and that sort of got the unions upset, who began picketing. So Glenville finally signed an agreement with the National Association of Broadcast Employees and Technicians, known as the NABET, but this angered the International Alliance of Theater Stage Employees, known as the IATSE, who began picketing the production. Herb Alder, a cameraman who was a member of the IATB, said, according to an August 1958 article, "We are filing such specifics in which we contend that the making of sweetheart contracts, such as Glenville made with the NABET, is a violation of the spirit of the trade union movement, and a deliberate attempt by management and a non-union organization to enter a field where they have never before supplied help. That the tender of the labor organization and its staff has been inadequate to meet the required standards and will only tend to bring strife in the field of labor and management where motion pictures are being made." To this, Bill Hines, chairman of the Association of Film Craftsmen of NABET, replied, "We've been called names before. We are not going to engage in any name calling. It sounds like crybaby tactics to me." Now, even when the film was done shooting, they were still calling it Sideburns and Sympathy. Paul Frees, director, and his actress wife Joyce Terry threw a cast party at their home in Hollywood for Tony Travis, Karen Alder, and Peter Brock to celebrate the completion of their current motion picture, Sideburns and Sympathy. Now, if I had to guess, I'd say the distributor changed the name to the Beatniks to avoid any union problems, sneak it into theaters without anybody noticing. And although Sideburns and Sympathy is a terrible name, I think the Beatniks is even worse, in my opinion. But at this time, the Beat Generation was a big thing, and all the low-budget filmmakers were trying to capitalize on that with films like The Bucket of Blood, The Rebel Set, and The Beat Generation. They were trying to capitalize on a thing they knew the public didn't really understand. On the Beatniks poster, International Pictures is listed, but I don't know how they fit into the whole thing. On top of that, the producers of the film The Beat Generation weren't all that happy with the title, and they tried to stop it from being released into theaters, and that resulted in another lawsuit. Anyway, that's about all I can find about the making of this film. You see, the problem is, if you go on the internet and search Beatniks, you get 1 million responses. 99.99% of them have nothing to do with this film. And if you search under the director's name, Paul Frees, again, you have the same problem. So now why don't we talk about the writer, director, and executive producer of this film, Paul Frees. He was born Selman Hirsch Frees and lived from 1920 to 1986. He started out as Buddy Green, a vaudeville impressionist. That led to a career in radio, but that was interrupted by World War II. He fought in Normandy on D-Day and was wounded in action. He was mainly known for his voice, and his credits are way too long to go into here, but he did many cartoon characters. A few of the characters I'll point out: he was Boris Bednoff in the Rocky and Bullwinkle Show. He overdubbed Tony Curtis's Josephine voice in Some Like It Hot, and he overdubbed Toshiro Mifune's voice for American audiences in films like Grand Prix and Midway. Mifune claimed that Paul sounds more like me than I do. He was also the voice of the Pillsbury Doughboy. As far as his acting goes, he was in such films as A Thing from Another World in 1951, The Harder They Fall in 1954, and Space Master X7 in 1958. Now with all this, he must have thought it was time to write and direct his own film, and while the credits say it was written and directed by Paul Frees, it was actually based on an original story by Joyce Terry and Ken Hertz. Joyce was also an actor who appears in the film, and she was married to Paul Frees at the time, and I'll have more about her when we talk about the actors. Ken Hertz was the production supervisor and art director for the film. Now back to Paul. He also wrote music, and you might remember one of his songs from the beginning of the film, Sideburns Don't Need No Sympathy.
Playing it cool, real slick, having a ball with a crazy chick. Sideburns don't need your sympathy.
Paul wrote that with a fellow named Eddie Brandt, and I'm not sure if the film's title comes from that song, or if the song was written because of the film's title. Who knows? Anyway, why don't we look at our cast? The star of the film is Tony Travis, who plays our hero, Eddie Crane. You know, the hero who helps rob an old couple at the beginning of the film? Travis Richard Kleifeld was from New York City and lived from 1926 to 2018. Tony was a young man who owned his own building business but was discovered by Diana Shore. Apparently Shore was playing tennis with the singer when she heard his singing voice. Diana Shore's enthusiasm over the singing voice flipped the 26-year-old Tony Travis right out of a successful building business and into a whole new career as one of the entertainment field's most amazing success stories. A top-flight singer herself, Diana heard the anonymous record on a tennis court and told partner Travis Kleifeld that the anonymous singer was so terrific she'd like to have him on her radio program. The singer was Kleifeld, who confessed his identity and agreed to star on her NBC show, never dreaming that he would launch a new career. But within weeks, he had appeared twice on her radio show, once on her television show, has signed an RCA Victor contract, been offered an MGM screen test, and auditioned for his own Tony Travis show on NBC Radio. Tony's first two records, a ballad called It's Easier Said Than Done, and a calypso tune, Mama, 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 were scheduled to hit music stands in July. Now, I don't know how he ended up playing tennis with singer Diana Shore, who was very popular at the time, but I have a theory, and I'm probably totally wrong. Anyway, imagine him being hired to work in her house, so he brings her along a recording of his own music. He ends up playing tennis with her, maybe during a break, and somehow his music gets played through the PA or stereo or whatever, and she goes, who is this guy? And he ends up getting signed by her. That's right, he got a contract through Diana Shore, but he wasn't quite prepared for his own success. He quit Hollywood to go to New York to study voice and acting, working in TV and summer stock for several seasons. Today he is back with an album that clearly shows what little musical schooling will do. This time I think we'll make it, says Tony, and we think he knows what he's talking about. So when it came time for this movie, it was another attempt at success. And Tony Travis, the young singer discovered by Diana Shore, has sold his $1 million construction business to devote all his time to a singing and acting career. Desi Arnaz wants Tony for a TV show. Now, as far as I can tell, Tony never really made it. He appeared in a few TV shows over the next couple of years and eventually he dropped out of sight. As far as I know, he returned to his own construction business and hopefully lived a happy life. Anyway, Karen Calder plays Iris, the female member of the gang. She was born Karen J. Stefanik Calder in Alberta, Canada, and lived from 1929 to 1984. She studied at the University of British Columbia while working in a cannery, a plywood factory, and a wire rope company in order to pay her tuition, and she began to get a lot of theater work. Karen Calder, a new Universal signee, looks a lot like Ava Gardner, and that ain't bad. Her first film was as Marge in Frances Joins the Wax in 1954, but after only got a few small uncredited parts and a few TV appearances before getting the role in the Beatniks. You'll soon be seeing a lot of this beautiful TV actress, Karen Kadler, on various shows, local and network. She'll be plugging her first feature movie, which bears the strange title Sideburns and Sympathy. Diana Shore's protege, Tony Travis, makes his film debut in it. Miss Kadler will tell viewers about a big contest. We are, she said brightly, conducting a search for the most perfect sideburns. I bade her good day. Miss Kadler, the dark-haired beauty who has been wowing the photogs at the premiere, is disappointed over her best scene in Sideburns and Sympathy hitting the cutting room floor. She plays an hysterical woman in the scene with Peter Breck, the very talented actor, that had to go for editing purposes, but a scene that stamps her as an actress of exceptional emotional power. After this, she appeared in a handful of TV shows and films like The Devil's Messenger in 1962, starring Lon Chaney. Sadly, she died at the young age of 54, and I'm not sure the cause. She had 2 children. Peter Breck plays the crazy gang member Bob Mooney. He was born Joseph Peter Breck in Rochester, New York, and lived from 1929 to 2012. He was the son of a jazz musician, and since his parents were always on the road, he pretty much grew up with his grandparents. He had a very long and successful career starting in 1955. Up until the Beatniks, he had just done TV work, but after he was in films such as Portrait of a Mobster in 1961, The Crawling Hand from 1963, a film we've talked about in the past, and Benji from 1974. The role he is best known for, however, is The Big Valley from 1965 to 1969, and he was in almost every TV show through the 1980s. Peter continued to act until 2004 when he was in an episode of Jimmy Glick in Lalawood. Terry Joyce plays Helen Tracy, the level-headed secretary who Eddie falls for. Joyce, who is known as Joy to her friends, was born Joyce Schultz in Brooklyn, New York, and lived from 1930 to 2008. She started out acting at age 14 when she played the voice of Raggedy Ann in the animated short film Suddenly It's Spring and its sequel, The Enchanted Square. Her career was very limited, only doing a couple of things before the Beatniks, films like The Neanderthal Man from 1953 and The Naked Street in 1955. She married Paul Frees in 1951, and the two would have 1 child together. She has only 2 more acting credits after this film, but by the early 1960s, she left acting to focus on a second career as an agent and voice teacher. And then we have Charles Delaney as the record producer Harry Bayless. Charles was born in New York City and lived from 1892 to 1959. He was a pilot during World War I and started performing in vaudeville after. He started in silent films in 1923 up until the point of this film, and sadly, he died before this film was actually released. Most of his work were in minor roles in films. Sam Edwards plays Red, the gang member who, well, meets a bad end. Sam was born in Macon, Georgia, and lived from 1915 to 2004. He was originally a radio star in the 1930s with the show Adventures of Sonny and Buddy. He had a very long acting career both on TV and films. He was one of those actors who was constantly popping up on TV and films and also did voice acting in cartoons. As far as the music, like I said, the songs were written by Paul Frees with Eddie Brandt. Eddie was an American composer and songwriter, as well as a television writer and animator. He lived from 1920 to 2011. He did a lot, wrote for TV shows, composed music, was a band leader, and more, but is best remembered for his North Los Angeles store, Eddie Brandt's Saturday Matinee. In his teenage years, he worked as a movie usher in Chicago and began collecting film memorabilia. In 1967, he opened his own shop, and in the 70s, it became the first to rent videos in Los Angeles, eventually having the largest selections of videos in one location. So that's about it. Before I go, I found this review in the Klein Weekly from May 26, 1960. The picture clearly shows what causes American mixed-up kids to tick, but wisely eschews moralizing. Joyce Terry pleases as the right-thinking Helen. Karen Calder scores in contrast as the wayward Iris. Tony Travis acts naturally and sings adequately as the chastened Eddie, and Peter Brock pulls out all the stops as the psychopath Moon. It has some feminine appeal, the song numbers are logically introduced, and the climax is nothing if not sultry. Point of appeal, hard-biting tale, talented young cast, crisp direction, hearty highlights, tunes, title, and handy footage. Do you agree? Well, I guess we'll find out next week when we watch the film together. Anyway, let's get back to me. On Tuesday morning, November 25th, I got up off this very couch to grab another cup of coffee, and suddenly, pain. Right back here, lower head, upper neck, burning, painful. The room went goofy. I sat down. But then as Tuesday went by, I was feeling better. And I was telling myself, I just need a good night's sleep. Well, that was a mistake because I was in a horrible night's sleep. And Wednesday, I went to see a doctor. He sent me to the emergency room where they found out my brain had been bled just a little. And that caused all kinds of... So I spent 4 days in the hospital getting every test they could think of. And apparently there's nothing wrong. It was just a one-time thing. So fingers crossed there, right? Anyway, you don't want to hear about my medical situation. Thanks for watching me today. I really appreciate it. It's good to be back. I will be back next week when we'll watch the film together. And I got a couple documentaries that are almost done. So I'm getting there. I'm sorry about the absence. So anyway, you take care. Try to stay healthy. Do as I say, not as I do. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye, everybody. Is the camera off yet?